Hey, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'd like to talk to you about drawing from concealed and close or confined locations. So what are we talking about when we reference close or confined locations? Close could be that you're in a crowded environment. In other words, there's people that are in close proximity to you. Confined could be that you're sitting maybe in a vehicle, could be in the booth of a restaurant. So they're different, but yet they still kind of communicate the same problem, which is that I don't have a lot of space to get both the gun out and possibly, if I had to, the gun back into the holster. So when we talk about the gun going back into the holster, it's not as critical because it's much more important for you to be able to get the gun out in a self-defense setting than it is to try to get that gun back in the holster. So we'll talk a little bit about it towards the end of the video. Now, when we talk about this, what are the two things that you have to keep in mind? Number one, what am I looking out for? I'm looking out for somebody that sees me drawing my gun and mistakes me for a bad guy. And now they try to jam my drawstroke up, or worse, they try to actually disarm or take the gun away. So with that being said, be mindful of proximity. You don't know who's around you. You don't know how they're going to react if you were to all of a sudden introduce a gun into potentially a stressful situation if it's not already high stress. The second part to that is I want to be able to draw my gun with minimal disruption to my normal technique, but that still protects myself or my presentation to the target without there being the possibility of somebody moving into my field of view or my field of fire. At the same time, I also need to make sure that as I'm drawing the gun out, that I prevent it from being obstructed. So when we talk about that, there's really only two things that we talk about. Number one is as I go to clear the gun from the holster, the first thing I'm doing is I'm bringing the gun nice and high up to my armpit level. As soon as I do that, I'm rotating the gun down. So it's going to be two possibilities here. When I rotate that gun down, I'm keeping it in nice and tight close to my body. That's going to prevent any possible accidental bumping or accidental grabbing, but it's also going to keep that gun nice and tight to prevent any type of deliberate gun grabs. The second thing about this positioning is that if I've identified a target directly in front of me to be a threat, then my muzzle has gone from a downward position straight to a horizontal position. And that's it. That's all that I need to do. So that eliminates any possibility of friendly fire or my muzzle covering something that I don't want. So when we're coming straight out of the holster, we're coming straight up. Now, a couple of problems that I see with people is when they come out of the holster, they immediately start to bring the gun upwards in this fashion. And as they're starting to bring the gun upwards here, number one, they have really no good control if they're in that close or confined position. This is not as easy for me to control the gun if I have the accidental gun grab. The second part to this problem is that the gun is waving itself up. So I don't have any control over where that muzzle is until that muzzle is really on that target. So when I come straight up and I rotate straight into this position here, I'm making a conscious decision to move away from my body. And as soon as I make that conscious decision to move away from my body, I'm saying that the probability of a accidental gun grab or bump is far less of an issue compared to that threat that I'm trying to deal with. Right? So that's kind of when I've made that decision to come from this position and go to two hands and extend the gun to the target, I've made that choice that everybody around me is probably less of an issue than the actual known threat. These are unknowns, that's the known. I have to plot my strategy based around the knowns. All right, so when it comes time to reholster, two things that we want to make sure of is that we look the gun into the holster. And when you look the gun into the holster, you have a very good chance of actually seeing the muzzle's movement. In other words, is the muzzle moving in an unsafe direction? Do I have people to the side of me that I potentially could be muzzling as I do that? Close counters, they're a very real thing. We have to be sure that we are thinking through what we're going to do for an inadvertent bystander that gets involved, as well as what am I going to do to maintain that muzzle in the safest, most efficient direction possible. All right, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Would love to hear your questions or comments. Please feel free to post them down below. Until then, take care and stay safe.